we have with us Dr. Gopal Krishna Thakur, Head, Department of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Antarrashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya, Central University, Wardha, Maharashtra. Before we begin this session, I take this opportunity and it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Thakur. Sir had done BSc Honours, MSc Chemistry from TNB College, Bhagalpur. Sir did MBA in Human Resource Management, PGD IM, PGD HRM from IGNOU. Sir did B.Ed, M.Ed and MPhil in Education from Delhi University and PhD from Jamia Millia Islamic University, New Delhi. Dr. Thakur has 26 years of teaching experience, 20 years of research experience, and 15 years of administrative experience. Sir had handled different positions like Principal of Mangalmay Institute of Management and Technology, Greater Noida from 2003 to 2011. In 2002, Sir took the charge of Council of Social Development as Education Specialist. In 2013, Sir became the Dean School of Education, Lingias University, Faridabad. In 2014, Dr. Thakur took the charge of Director School of Education, Noida International University. Sir also was Chairman of Social Development and Research Foundation. Further, in 2016, Sir acted as Proctor of Mahatma Gandhi Antarrashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya. At present, Dr. Thakur Head, Department of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Antarrashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya. Also member of Academic Council, member of School Board Education, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, Chairperson Board of Studies, Department of Education, Advisor Gender Sensitization Cell, Associate Director, Teaching Learning Center for Hindi Studies, Project Head, SOE, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya Mission on Teachers and Teaching, MHRD, Government of India. Dr. Thakur's research interest areas like science education, teacher education, educational philosophy, ethnographic studies, phenomenological studies. Sir had completed 2 projects and 3 projects are still undergoing. Dr. Thakur had presented number of research papers at international and national level. He is also member of Indian Association of Teacher Educators and All India Association Educational Research, and still many more achievements and accomplishments. Sir is going to speak on the topic Grounded Theory Designs. With this brief introduction, I hand over the session to Dr. Gopal Krishna Thakur. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ansari, for this lengthy, not so desired introduction. I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Pandya from University of Mumbai, Professor Balani, and all of the faculty members of BTTC, all organizers, and all the participants who are here now to listen to me. Today's topic that I'm going to discuss on is about grounded theory research design. This grounded theory research designs, like all of you, I'm sure must be knowing, this is a very recent phenomenon in the qualitative research approach, where we have been discussing, we have been working, though not many researches in India particularly have been done specifically pointing this grounded theory research designs as one of the methods. But yet, this is of very great importance to know what exactly is grounded theory and why should we include this in our research endeavor whenever we tend to take up any research. This debate of whether qualitative research is good, better, or quantitative research is better, this is over now, I guess. Because this debate, first thing is that will never end. This is an everlasting debate. Every research methodology, every research paradigm has its own merits, its own shortcomings. But yet, as we have discussed last time in our webinar on quantitative research, focused on quantitative research, there were very good research methods. And this issue of whether qualitative research should be a part in social science disciplines, education discipline, is of importance. And so we are discussing about grounded theory as one of the, there are many, 4, 5 at least we discussed, like ethnography is there, phenomenology is there, case study is there, narrative inquiry is there, grounded theory research design is there under this qualitative research approach. So to begin with, let's have an understanding of why this is called grounded theory. Dear participants, this word, this term stemmed out of a perception that a theory that is grounded in the data, a theory that is very much grounded in the data should have some meaning for our lives. And only denoting that, this grounded theory term has been coined, perhaps. Grounded theory, you can see on the slide, is a form of qualitative research which attempts to generate theory by making sense of the phenomenon under study, by means of collecting data, analyzing it, and deriving meaning out of the data. And when we say that we collect data, make sense of the data, then there is an implicit meaning, implicit sense that this research methodology uses inductive reasoning, in contrast to the hypothetico-deductive model of the scientific method under positivist paradigm. You know, even in qualitative research, most of the research methods start with some conceptual framework, some theoretical framework. Generally, what happens is we start a research, we have certain research questions in our mind, then we begin, we identify to find out the answers of the research questions that are there in our mind. We attempt to follow a certain conceptual framework. We have certain theories, sociological theories, psychological theories, and with the help of those theories, we build up a theoretical framework. And then we proceed to carry out our research. We collect data, we analyze it, we have a review of related literature, we, with the help of that, we clarify, we articulate what exactly we need to do after having gone through the review of related literature, review of related studies. We try to identify research gaps, and then we proceed further to find out the answers of those questions, research questions. And then finally, when we arrive at any conclusion, we have findings, we try to juxtapose those findings with the research, with the theoretical framework that we had conceptualized in the beginning of the research. So this is the trend. This is the trend of any, be it quantitative research, be it qualitative research. Now, coming to the grounded theory research design, there is a big difference. The big difference is we don't have, in the beginning of our research, we don't have any theoretical framework. We don't believe in following any prescription of theoretical framework. So we don't have any theoretical framework in mind. Rather, what we believe is we will explore theory or theories while conducting grounded theory research. So the basic difference between grounded theory research and the other modes of research is this, that in the beginning of research, in other methods or methodologies, we have certain theories and we start following those theoretical framework. But in grounded theory research design, we do not have any theoretical framework, and we try to generate theory. We try to articulate meaning out of the data. You can see in the first slide, thematic image is given on what I have written about grounded theory. There are two parts. One is scattered in a haphazard manner, certain pieces. And the second part is well arranged. Out of those pieces, ladders are there, then seating arrangement and other things have been made. So this is a symbolic representation of data and theory. So in the beginning, we have data, and now while doing grounded theory research, we have to make sense of the data to articulate certain pattern. And when we articulate certain pattern, that becomes a theory. Of course, that theory is not a universal theory, because the basic premises of grounded theory research design doesn't claim that we are going to generate a theory that would be universal in nature. Rather, what grounded theory research design emphasizes is, with the help of this research method, localized, contextualized theories should come up. So this is the essence of grounded theory. Of course, when we deal with human beings, we know that not every single pattern can be applicable to all population. Maybe if we are going to a school, maybe a class of 8th or 9th standard, or maybe a class of Hindi or English or mathematics, take any specific class, can have a pattern of teacher-student relationship or student-students relationship, which could be different from the other class. And if you are supposed to, or else if you have a question in your mind, how this particular relationship builds up, how this particular relationship, particular rapport of a teacher with his students or a student-student's peer relationship develops. So a theory as an undercurrent of this research question obviously will not be universal in nature, because any relationship between teacher and students or between different students can have its specific causes, can have its specific dynamics. As a researcher, as a scholar, or as a student of education or social sciences, this is a basic duty of all of us to find out the reason, so that even if a theory which is not universal in nature, like principle of gravity, theory of relativity, even if our theory will not be of that kind, at least we will have contextualized theories or contextualized understanding, so that while understanding different phenomena in our surrounding, we can have certain examples. So this is the purpose. In a way, this grounded theory is a middle range theory. This doesn't claim to be something of utmost superiority that will envelop all across the world or all across the universe. At the same time, this is not something which is very transient in nature. So this is a contextualized theory generating endeavor, and with the help of this, we try to generate theory, not we try to test the theory, because in testing theory, the mechanisms are related to positivist paradigm. Generally, we do hypothesis testing and all that, but in grounded research design, we do not tend to do that. So no testing, no conforming to any theoretical framework, and no proving back to the theoretical framework that, yeah, whatever we have discovered or whatever we have generated matches with what we had started with. So these notions are not there in this grounded theory research design. This is a qualitative research, one of the qualitative research methods, and I have just mentioned in the second box what exactly qualitative research is. is understanding phenomena in its natural setting. We don't have a controlled or experimental setting. Then making sense of the phenomena through interpretation of the gathered field notes, photographs, conversations, observations, etc. So this qualitative research approach has its own specificity, and grounded theory research design draws on qualitative research approach with its own specificity. Moving on to the next, let us see some more to understand the conceptual elements of grounded theory. What Strauss and Corbin said is that this is a general methodology for developing theory that is grounded in data systematically gathered and analyzed. Like objectivist or positivist paradigm, people can say that you in qualitative research paradigm, you may not have a very systematic scheme of arriving at conclusion, but no. This qualitative research design and grounded theory suggests that only when your data is systematically gathered and properly duly analyzed, then the theory that develops out of your process is called grounded theory. And this research design is a general methodology to do that. Again, Creswell says a grounded theory design is a systematic qualitative procedure used to generate a theory that explains at a broad conceptual level a process, an action, or an interaction about a substantive topic. The next statement we again draw from Corbin and Strauss, and then he says, they say grounded theory is a specific methodology developed by Glasser and Strauss for the purpose of building theory from data. The next slide can have this. The term grounded theory is used in a more sense to denote theoretical constructs derived from qualitative analysis of data. And as I have said in the very beginning, the phrase grounded theory refers to a theory that is developed inductively from a corpus of data. And if done well, the resulting theory at least fits one data set perfectly, at least one data set, if not all, because that theory is an outcome of the analysis of a specific data. So this contrasts with theory derived deductively from grand theory without the help of data, and which could therefore turn out to fit no data at all. You know, if you do some deductive, if you follow some deductive methodology, deduction, that you begin with any theory, and then you try to fit that theory to certain data, certain localized data, there is a serious chance that you may not match, or your data may not match with the deductive, with the theory that you have started deductively, because those theories or that particular theory that you are using for your deductive reasoning may not have any relationship with the data that you have in your hand. So this theory, grounded theory, will at least fit one data set, because you are working with data and then you are trying to articulate a theory. Coming to the genesis, a very recent phenomena, two gentlemen, two American sociologists, Barney Glaser and Anselm Strauss, they were working on a different theme altogether. At California, USA, Barney Glaser came to do his postdoc after having done his PhD from Columbia, and he started working with Anselm Strauss, who was there, and they were working on a very interesting theme. They were trying to understand the death awareness. dying awareness. They were doing survey in several hospitals of California, and particularly with the patients who were in a very critical condition. And they were trying to make sense of what is their awareness of dying. They wrote a book on that. But out of these activities, they developed this idea of grounded theory. Because as awareness of dying, that book came out of the experiences, real life experiences of those patients who were about to die. So these two gentlemen propounded this grounded theory. They wrote a book in 1967. The name of the book is The Discovery of Grounded Theory. And this, in this book, they expounded the detail of grounded theory. Later on, they parted their ways, and there have been different sub branches of grounded theory. Maybe we can discuss. But what they argued, on the next slide, you can see what they argued, both of them, that researchers needed a method that would allow them to move from data to theory so that new theories could emerge. Such theories would be specific to the context in which they had been developed. Certainly, that this idea was certainly based on their experiences that they gained while working with those patients in critical conditions. They said that they would be grounded in the data. The theory would be grounded in the data from which they had emerged, rather than rely on analytical constructs, categories, or variables from pre-existing theories. So grounded theory, therefore, was designed to open up a space for the development of new contextualized theories. So this is what is about how this theory came into existence. I generally try to relate it to the philosophical tenets or philosophical understandings. My keen inclination to that area propels me to do that. So let us come to the next. I have tried to bring up this, bring out this philosophical underpinnings of grounded theory. Philosophically, any research, what it does is it tries to explore the truth. It tries to create knowledge. And while doing so, it combines certain things. It takes up an approach. It tries to explore things. It reasons out. It explains. It verifies. So there are certain disciplines that provide some background to that. So grounded theory combines the diverse tradition of sociology, positivism, and symbolic interaction. Sociology, because we work in a social setup, in a societal setup, and with the help of that, we try to explain any social phenomena. That is the purpose of any research. That should be the purpose of any research, that its outcomes should be able to explain any social phenomena. Positivism, why I say, though this grounded theory came as a contrast of those research methodologies believing in positivism, but still it combined certain elements. You know, these two gentlemen, Glaser, belong to a discipline of at most positivist paradigm. He believed in meticulous articulation, categorizing, classifying, and denoting certain things based on minute observations. Whereas Strauss believed in human behaviors, he believed in emotions, sentiments, social interactions, and those interactions which at some time or many times do not use words. Sometimes our body language, sometimes our facial expressions, sometimes even the kind of words that we use do not necessarily mean what we are exactly using. Like if a person out of, very soft emotion in a very soft time says this to his or her friend, I hate you. That doesn't mean that the person is really hating that person. So sometimes even words do not mean what are being said. So symbolic interactionism, this is very important in grounded theory. If a mother sometimes, or if partners sometimes say to their other person, the counterparts, that I will kill you, that doesn't mean the partner has this intention of killing exactly. So words sometimes do not give the meaning exactly what is being communicated. That is why symbolic interaction. So this research methodology combines sociology, positivism. Why positivism? Positivism, by saying this, that this theory doesn't mean that exactly all the objectivism of those positivist paradigms should be a part of this. Rather than clarifying, categorizing, coding. We'll come to coding next. So they use this techniques while articulating the meaning, making sense of the phenomena. And since generally grounded theory is done to understand the undercurrent of the processes, so, and it in terms keeps evolving. This is not a preset combination of ideas and theories. So it keeps evolving in the process. So grounded theory is methodologically dynamic in nature. This studies the interrelationship between meaning in the perception of the subjects and their action. Through the meaning of symbols, human beings interpret their world and the actors who interact with them. The next, the inductive grounded theory translates and discovers new understandings of human beings' behaviors that are generated from the meaning of symbols. In a way, this theory attempts to understand the world by interpreting human interaction by the use of symbols such as language, or as I said, such as sometimes expressions. The task of the grounded theory researcher is to gain knowledge about the socially shared meaning that forms the behaviors and the reality of the participants being studied. Let us try to understand some basic tenets of grounded theory. As you can see on the next, grounded theory involves the progressive identification and integration of categories of meaning from data. When we see categories of meaning, here we have some difference from what we do in positivist paradigm, what we do in quantitative method of research. In quantitative method, we have clear-cut, criteria of classifying things, criteria of classifying objects. We have numerals, we have numeral values, we have prescribed way of classifying things. Here in qualitative approach of research, in grounded theory, what we do is, we have as data words, sentences. In quantitative, we have numerals, you have numerical values, statistical outcomes. But in qualitative, you have words and sentences as your data. taken out of samples, what they speak, what they share with them, others, what activities do they do, how you have observed that. All these things you do not write in numbers, you write in words, you write in sentences. And so grounded theory research, what it does is it integrates. First thing is that it categorizes, it classifies words and sentences. And then it integrates all those to make better sense out of that. So this grounded theory is both the process of category identification, category of particular theme. Like in a family, if father or some other elder member, if they are into job, so their morning begins with in a very haste routine, that they are getting ready to go to office, they're doing certain things, they are taking up what they have done last, or if any official work is there, so they are preparing for that. A child who is in school gets ready at the earliest, like he picks up his all bags and all the things, and then see what books he or she is supposed to take to school. Or if he is in on Sunday or any holiday, then he is resting, cooling his heel properly. So if you will ask his or her parents about how their day went on, and if you ask the child, so both will have different modes of expressions. And if you collect this data from similar families, then you will have certain pattern that children will say, oh, we had a very boring day, we could not go out, particularly taking the instance of these corona days. We could not go out, we don't have any work, and we have been fed up with this online teaching and all that. The parents will say, oh, we are, always occupied with the assignments or work tasks given, and then online we are in working mode, particularly teachers, university teachers, they are doing online teaching. Now, at least this holiday summer break has begun, so it's fine. They may be feeling relieved a bit, but expressions of different set of people will have different theme, different words, and you can derive meanings differently. So you have different themes based on that. So in a way, grounded theory, what it does is it identifies category of expressions, category of words being said, category of sentences having been used. And then finally, they integrate to derive any particularly common meaning or its product. That becomes its contextualized product, theory. Grounded theory is emergent in nature. When we say emergent, that means that this research methodology, as I have already said, doesn't have any predetermined theoretical framework or predetermined, pre-tested theory to work upon. Rather, this theory, this grounded theory research, when you use this term, then theory comes in like automatically. But grounded theory research means you are trying to generate a theory out of the data. And so that would be specific to any particular fact or phenomenon. And that theory will be grounded in data. It is developed by analyzing and interpreting the data, the words, sentences, themes, categories systematically. So this is what is grounded theory research related tenets. One more thing is that grounded theory as method provides us with guidelines on how to identify categories, how to make links between categories, and how to establish relationships between them. I'll come to that while I'll be discussing coding. Grounded theory as theory is the end product of this process, obviously, because no theory is there in the beginning. So grounded theory as theory is the end product. It provides us with an explanatory framework with which I mean, in order to understand the phenomenon under investigation. So much have been talked about grounded theory. Let us have some specific characteristics of grounded theory research design. On the next, you can see, I mean, this is a pictorial presentation of key characteristics. It is a process approach. It includes, the approach is process oriented, because we study about process. We are into process as researcher, and we at the same time study about processes, social processes. We are not conducting any historical studies. We are not conducting any ex post facto study. We try to understand the reality of any social phenomenon which is taking place. So it has process approach, then it has coding, core categories, then it has constant comparative analysis, negative case analysis, then theoretical sensitivity, theoretical sampling, theoretical saturation, memos, and then theory generation. We'll come to each of the characteristics. Coming to begin with, the process approach. The research process in grounded theory research is a series of interactions and outcomes, you can see on the slide, among a group of people regarding the studied phenomenon. As a grounded theory researcher, you're going to understand any particular social process, any particular societal dynamics, how people interact with each other, how people spend their lives together, what is their daily routine, how do they interact, how do they establish relationship. So in a way, you are trying to understand their interactions. And in order to understand their interactions, you also get into interaction with them. So this is about processes. That's why we say this includes a process approach. Then the other characteristics that we discussed generally in other quantitative research, though I should not always shift back and forth to quantitative while describing about grounded theory, but still, since we are students of education and social sciences, so we should have in our minds, in the back of our minds, all the research methodologies, related concepts alive, in order to compare and contrast, not to undermine, of course. So categories. The specificity of this grounded theory research is that while conducting research, a researcher identifies categories and denote them, designate by grouping together of instances, any events or processes or occurrence. So similar type of incidences, similar type of processes will have a same category. So that category will share those processes will share central features or characteristics with one another. That's why they will be classified into one particular category. This then comes coding. So coding is the process by which categories are identified. In the early stages of analysis, coding is largely descriptive. Descriptive means, like if in any class, if all the students or most of the students are not very keen on attending that particular teacher's class, so they will, express, and if you ask them, so if not directly, they will say, no, we don't like this teacher. So if they can't say, generally students do not say that, so then they will have different excuses for that, why they do not wish to attend that particular class. So they will have different expressions. But at the core of that, as the central feature, you can derive a meaning that, oh, he or she is reluctant to attend the class. So if a child is say, I'm feeling headache, or I have my stomach upset, or certain things, I'm going to bathroom. So the general meaning that you can derive is that unwillingness to attend classes. So then you put a code. unwilling to attend classes. And then all different types of statements that finally, give a result that the child is not willing to take class. He or she is making excuses. So those statements will fall under this coding. So this is what is coding. Coding is descriptive, and this is the initial leveling. Different types of codings are there. We'll discuss this. So what we do is, since we do not have numerical data while doing this research, so we write those statements and then we label them. We have to make a class or category, then we label them. We do this coding, unwillingness to attend class. So, but then what happens is, as coding progresses, this is the very beginning. As coding progresses, the researchers is able to identify high-level categories that systematically integrate low-level categories or the superficial words used into some meaningful units. And those units are based on analysis that we do. So analytical categories are introduced. So this is what is done in this coding. Then is constant comparative analysis. Constant comparative analysis ensures that the coding process maintains its momentum by moving back and forth between the identification of similarities among and differences between emerging categories. Having identified a common feature that unites instances of a phenomenon, the researcher needs to refocus on differences within a category in order to be able to identify any emerging subcategories. So this is another specificity of this grounded theory research design, that the researcher keeps, moving back and forth between once you identify, once you go through these statements given by the participants, you do labeling. Then you go back to see other statements. Then you try to identify whether those are similar in nature or not. If you find the third one has come, which can encompass the earlier two, but will have some different word that will have the same meaning out of the three statements or out of the three expressions, so then you label them. So always a researcher's duty is to do constant and comparative analysis. Then also you have to do negative case analysis in order to substantiate, in order to consolidate your perception. You need to understand a pattern, and while understanding a pattern, if you are going to make a meaning, common meaning, make sense of the phenomenon, so you need to identify, you need to look for whether there is any negative case. Negative case means, in a class, if say you interacted with 10 students and they are almost giving the same expressions, you must try to look for any such student whose statement would be just opposite to what the others have said. So any negative case that will not conform to what earlier has been expressed, you must try to understand that. You must try to find out and analyze. That will help you consolidate, clarify your perception or the sense-making process. Then is theoretical sensitivity. Theoretical sensitivity, when we say, is as a researcher, when he or she moves from descriptive to an analytical level, he or she interacts with the data. That is, researcher asks questions of the data which are in turn modified by the emerging answers. So you have to, since you are making sense of the human expressions, you are making sense of the social processes, so you must be very careful, you must be sensitive enough to understand the real meaning of the data. You have to understand the categories, you have to understand real meaning, so you have to be very, very sensitive towards that. You have to understand all the processes with minute details. If you have done a labeling, and if you have if you are including certain other statements into that, be careful whether the labeling that you have already designated
is in tune with the basic essence of the other statements that you are clubbing together. So be sensitive. Theoretical sampling. Why do we say theoretical sampling? In quantitative research or while studying, we have not heard of this term, theoretical sampling. Sampling is different. Random, stratified random sampling, snowballing sampling, purposive sampling, conventional sampling, these sampling are there. Here it is theoretical sampling. What it is? Theoretical sampling. Why do we refer this as theoretical sampling is because here we do not have pre-identified samples. We do not have, like what we do in quantitative is, we have population, and out of that population, based on certain prescribed criteria, we identify, we select our sample. But here in grounded theory, our main data is, our main sample is expressions of human beings, statements of or reactions or responses of the identified subjects. Subjects means human beings. And while doing grounded theory research, you identify words, themes, categories based on sentiments, based on emotions, based on expressions. So while you do your research, you label things. Then you identify, oh, this is the expression, unwillingness to go to school, or willingness to attend a particular class, or proactively participating in a co-curricular activities. So these are certain labeling, and while these make your sample, and these are theoretical in nature. When we say theoretical, means these samples are based on your constructs, your constructs about the place, the location, or the people where you are working, where you are doing research, based on their expressions. So those sample are called theoretical sample. So the process is theoretical sample. The purpose of theoretical sampling is systematically directing the grounded theorists to choose the most important data for the studied phenomenon. Of course, because once you do initial sampling, then you try to make out common meaning out of that. Then you try to finally make sense of the overall phenomena. So this is a gradual progression towards anything. Another is theoretical saturation. Theoretical saturation means, like, in quantitative research, what you do is you try to make your sample as good as can give you a valid result. Grounded theory doesn't believe in making numbers. So the theoretical saturation means if you are trying to understand the nature of expression or the kind of theme you are trying to develop, make sense of, and if you have interacted with 10 persons, they are giving you the same statements, that makes same sense. And if you are now again interacting with 11th or 12th person and you are finding the same statement, same expression, same responses, that means in that particular group, you have arrived at a saturation phase. Means you are not going to get any different idea. So once this state of theoretical saturation emerges, you stop taking any further data. So this is the specificity of grounded theory research. In quantitative, you have as many numbers to validate your research that is required. Of course, in experimental, you have very little, or you can do away with 50 students or 30, 40, maybe, quite possible. Or in a case study, you can have. But here, it says, deliberately it says that if you arrive at saturation, you stop taking further data. That means the instances of variation for existing categories have ceased to emerge now. So this is what is called theoretical saturation. Then is memo writing. Memo writing is another interesting thing of grounded theory research. Throughout the process of data collection and analysis, the researcher should maintain a written record of theory development. Like if you're talking to a person, they give you, they expressed in a specific manner, they are using any specific phrase, any specific term. While you label them, you keep writing a memo in order to recall them later on. So this memo is your own, your own statement, your own perception of what you are understanding through that process. So that would be your comment on that. That would be your comment on that. Then is theory generation. This is out of the characteristics. This is the final stage of grounded theory research, where the outcome of grounded theory research is to construct a theory that explains a studied phenomenon from the collected data. So this is all about characteristics of grounded theory design. Time is running fast, and I will try to conclude it well in time, but maybe I may take, with the permission of the Professor Balani, Professor Pandya, or the organizers, maybe a couple of more minutes.
Sir, still it is 12 o'clock, sir. 11:50. You can go ahead, sir. No problem. Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Sir, we can continue till 12, 20 and 25 also.
Yeah,
Take your
thank you.
time, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please,
Thank
sir.
you.
Please, sir. Go ahead.
So let us come to the types of grounded theory designs. Many different types and patterns nowadays have been, into practice. But the core that emerged and now practitioners are indulged into are three types generally we discuss about. One is the emerging design. On the next slide, you can see the emerging design. Another is the systematic design. And the third one is the constructivist design. In the beginning, Glaser started with, and he advocated about, emerging design, grounded theory research. This emerging design is the process in which the researcher collects data, analyzes it immediately, rather than waiting until all data collected. So you collect your data, and in the evening you analyze, or maybe you take one more day maximum, but you analyze it immediately. And then bases the decision, the researcher bases the decision about what data to collect next on this analysis. So immediately you collect data, you do analysis, and you arrive at a decision whether you need further data collection of the same kind, or you need to move on towards some more categories, towards some other categories. Otherwise, so in order to reach the data saturation phase, you do it immediately, analyze your data and move on. So this is the first phase of emerging design. Here you do everything. You do coding, labeling, coding, categorizing. And when you find that no more variation is being collected or being obtained, you stop collecting that particular data. Then you move on to next one. So this is what is called emerging design. The systematic design, grounded theory research, was advocated by Strauss and Corbin when they parted their ways. Strauss parted his ways from Glaser and started working with Corbin in '98. They propounded this. This is a systematic design in grounded theory, which emphasizes the use of data analysis steps of open coding, axial coding, and selective coding, and then development of a logic paradigm or a virtual picture of the theory generated. So these three, they categorized, they articulated, and they emphasized on open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. What we do in open coding is we identify important words or phrases and label them by using a suitable term. Here I've written in bracket in vivo. In vivo is, by in vivo we mean a particular term or a particular phrase that your subjects or people on whom you are working, with whom you are doing, on whom you are doing your grounded theory research, while interacting with you, if they use a certain phrase or a certain term which is common in them. So that is called in vivo. And that in vivo specifies a very certain meaning that nobody else can give you. So based on that, you label those words or phrases or sentences using a suitable term. So this is the primary stage of coding. All collected data need to be classified into the corresponding categories. In the beginning, you do this open coding. Then you do axial coding. As axis denotes, axis is, by axis we can understand that axis combines, connects one point to another point. In abstraction, we can understand this. So axial coding is when we have done open coding, then we look back at all the data with the coding done, and we try to understand that one particular coding, labeling or category, whether is in tune with the other labels or in tune with the other categories. So this is the process of axial coding. We try to connect, we try to build hypothetical relationship between the major categories and their corresponding subcategories. So first thing we do is open coding, then we try to connect relationship, we try to see, we try to find the relationship between those different categories or subcategories or coding. So this is the process of axial coding. Then is the third one. This is the final one, selective coding. This is the last stage of coding, because theory is generated by interpreting the interrelationships that emerge among categories formed in axial coding. I'll give you an example later. So this axial coding, once we did open coding, then we interrelated, we connected based on certain common elements. So what we did was axial coding, and then finally we tried to generate a theory, generate a common relationship between all the data available. So in this process, selective coding retains only relevant variables to the core variables in order to yield an explicit theory. So this is what is selective coding. This is the final stage where complete generalized version of relationship or any explanation of the social phenomena is put forth. So the selective coding is this. The third type of grounded theory research design is constructivist approach design. This was developed by Chalmers. This design is developed by Kathy, and according to this, as constructivists believe that in social processes, an individual is interacting not in isolation, rather any process of interaction, any event which is taking place can have multiple social realities occurring simultaneously rather than a single reality. And that is true. That is true, absolutely true. When we are in a social setting, when we express our views, or when we react to a particular situation, or when we respond to a particular situation, we are not like amoeba. We are human beings with bundles of emotions within. And our behaviors are driven by, clubbed emotions, clubbed sentiments, clubbed, thought processes happening inside. So what constructivists believe, that multiple social realities keep occurring simultaneously. So this coding, labeling, or making sense can have a broad framework in order to understand the real thing, real picture. And applying this constructivists focus on the importance of meanings, individual attribute, to the focus of the study. Applying active codes, the researcher should look at the participants' thoughts, feelings, values, viewpoints, assertions, rather than gathering facts and describing acts. As just a couple of minutes back I said that sometimes merely words do not suffice the meaning, making meaning. As I said that when in a family, if you say some of your family members that I'm going to kill you, that doesn't mean that you are really having a gun in your hand and you are really intending to kill that person. That can have a different meaning. So the researcher's duty here is to understand the meaning, not just the word said. So this is what constructivist approach of grounded theory designs emphasize on. So, I mean, we have discussed about this grounded theory research with its different dimensions. Let us have some key concepts of grounded theory. Well, this is an approach to describe relationships where little is known, obviously, where little is known, or to provide a fresh take on existing knowledge. On the next slide, you can see grounded theory is a method to systematically build integrated sets of concepts from systematically obtained empirical data. Here, you should not get confused with the word empirical. Empirical is, of course, generally used in positivist paradigm. But here, if we say empirical data means with our own senses, a researcher with his or her own senses obtains data. That is empirical. This research method is a process of composing knowledge through intimate contact with the subjects. Subjects here means people whom you are working on, whom you are interacting with, and event under study. And if you're trying to understand the specificity, the undercurrent of any event, then this is a process of composing knowledge through intimate contact. Very deep contact you should have. Unless and until you have a very deep contact, you cannot understand the real meaning. And maybe there is a chance of coming back to your own place with superficial meaning. So you must have intimate contact. And ultimately, a theory that is shaped by data as well as by the researcher. Of course, here you cannot separate researcher from the field, from this meaning-making process, because it is the researcher who is making meaning, who is making sense out of any phenomenon. So, coming to why and when should you do this grounded theory research? As researcher, we have now like cafeteria of different approaches in front of us. So why should we do and when should we do grounded theory research? As stated earlier, generally a research is done to explain the meaning, to explain certain data. I'll come to the question. I'm unable to look at the moment. I'll definitely. So in order to generate a theory or in order to develop an explanation of a process, every research, even science does the same. It explains the processes taking place in nature. Here, as a social science, as an educational researcher, it is our duty to understand and not just understand, to explain the social phenomena, to explain what is happening in classroom, to explain what kind of behavior is taking place between teacher and student, between students and students, between teacher and parents, between teachers and principals, between teachers and co-teachers, between planners, educational policy makers, and all that. Yeah, there are software. Maybe we can have. There are. You can do this Google searching. You will find many softwares available now. to analyze qualitative data. There is no dearth of that. Then grounded theory research is helpful, especially when current theories about a phenomenon are either inadequate or non-existent. Like you're taking a classroom situation when you wish to study some process such as how do pupil teachers develop rapport with the school students. Like if all of you are from teacher education discipline, you know in B.Ed, we send our students for teaching practice in schools. And then we find that some of the our B.Ed students develop a very good rapport with their students, class students, in comparison to others. So, and there is no specific theory of that. These are very contextualized, very localized phenomenon, and there is no universal theory for that. So, if you have to understand why, how a particular pupil teacher is developing a good rapport or developing rapport with his or her students, what kind of strategies are being used, so you try to understand. Or maybe if you try to understand how people from very humble background, how a girl having a very different sort of family background develop their career, what is their aspiration level, what kind of life processes they are into. So if there may not be any specific theory to explain all this. So here in such cases, grounded theory research method come to your help. The aim of this is, as Glaser particularly stated, is to discover the theory implicit in data. So this is grounded theory is best used when no explicit hypothesis exists to be tested, or when such hypotheses do exist but are too abstract to be tested in a logical and deductive manner. Glaser and Strauss say this further on the next slide, where researchers have an interesting phenomenon without explanation and from which they seek to discover theory from data. So all these situations propel us, all these situations can, induce in us the willingness to take up grounded theory research method. Coming to the method on the next, the basic idea of the grounded theory approach is to read a textual database. We do not have numerals or numerical database. We have text-related database, and discover or label variables called categories, concepts, and properties and their interrelationships. The data do not have to be literally textual. Maybe they could be observations or behavior, such as interrelations and events in an institution. As I said, relationship between teacher and students, they may be in the form of field notes, which are like diary entries and all. Field notes, when you go to observe any particular phenomenon, you keep writing, you take notes, and those field notes are there. So your data is textual in nature. And how do you do data collection? Here, on the next, you can see data collection through interviews with the help of demographic data, observations, questionnaires, records. These are under retrospective analysis. Those records may be written records, historical records. Then you do survey. You keep on, if you are taking interview, then you have your tape recorders or mobile on, obviously with the consent of the subjects, so that you may revert back to, you may refer back to your own data, which would be in a recorded version, videotapes, and all these are the means of collecting data. Next is data analysis. How do we do data analysis? So the aims of data analysis is to organize and reduce the great deal of data. Great deal of data, like in words, And in sentences, we have bundles of data. So the purpose is to reduce them, to churn out real meaning. So further sampling each piece of data into themes with similar properties, as I just discussed, and consequently lead to theory formation. So data analysis process for a qualitative research deals with the massive data in forms of words, language, and the implied meanings. Here, data analysis is done word by word, line by line, phrase by phrase. Though it is a time-taking process, but initially to begin with, that's why the open coding is there. So you have to analyze word by word, words being said, data line by line, phrase by phrase. That's why it is said that when data saturation arrives, I'm coming to that. When data saturation arrives, you stop taking further data. Even if from 10 or 15 persons you have collected data, that is enough, because you have to analyze it, and that will take lots of time. So what you do is key point coding. You try to make sense of the commonalities and then note the key point. And there are computer softwares, of course, available for analyzing your data. So what you do is, how do you take up this grounded theory research? First thing is, you do not just jump into doing grounded theory research for any particular phenomena. First, decide carefully if grounded theory design will be the best suited method to address your research problem. Then you try to identify the process. Identify a process to study, to access. Then you seek approval of the people who you are going to work on, or a society, maybe, or if any formal approval is needed, you take that. Then you do this theoretical sampling. Theoretical sampling, just make this clear. Theoretical sample means identify emotions, identify particular level for their expressions, and then those will become your theoretical sample. Then you do coding of the data. Then finally you do selective coding and develop the theory. Then you validate the theory. Validating theory in qualitative research is different from validating what is done in quantitative. Validating theory, what you have generated, can be possible if you have noted down a phenomenon, taken interviews and did labeling, and then made meaning out of those, what has been said, what has been expressed, and what you prepare, you send it back. There are 2-3 ways. One is you send it back to the persons whom you are worked with or who you have worked on, to just check whether what you have written about that particular phenomenon or that particular expression, if they say, yes, yeah, this is what we wanted to say, or yeah, this is what is happening here, or this is what happens. So if they validate, means your data is validated and your theory is validated, because you are making sense of others' phenomena. You are making sense of what others interact, share, or do. So you validate. And then at the same time, you can send your theory, your developed conceptual framework to some experts of the field, to some experts of the same research methodology to validate. So this is again, like you validate your research instruments by sending them to experts. Similarly, you can validate your theory by sending those things to the experts of the field. But at the same time, I personally will recommend, if possible, send it to the persons who you have worked on. They are the best source of validation. And then finally, you write a grounded theory research report. Now, you evaluate the quality of your grounded theory research, or maybe as academician, if any grounded theory, I don't see any, but maybe in future, or even now, maybe some of the researchers might be doing this. If this report comes to you, how can it be evaluated? So there are certain criteria. Grounded theory research report evaluation should be looked into with this perspective that is there an obvious connection between the categories and the raw data, categories that you have formed. Here, you do not have, like in other paradigms, you come up, you go to the field with your predetermined categories. No, here it is not. In grounded theory, you make categories, you label categories, you articulate categories while conducting research. So after research is there, research report is there, then you try to look into whether any obvious connection exists or not between the category, between the label and the raw data. Then again, is the theory useful as a conceptual explanation for the process being studied? The theory that has generated during the process. So whether that theory is useful as a conceptual framework or not. Then does the theory provide a relevant explanation of actual problem and the basic process? So these are the criteria. Is the theory modified as conditions change or the researcher collects additional data in the process? Because this is the beauty of grounded theory research, that you keep generating theory because there is no universal theory related notion here. So you keep developing, keep generating theory by constant comparing process, constant comparing analysis, constant comparative analysis. You keep moving back and forth with the raw data to the labeling, and you try to develop while selective coding is the main step where you generate theory. So there you can look into the report or the process, the whole written document, whether that suggests in between that whether the researcher has ever modified, if any condition of, if any change of perception, any change of notion has occurred. So whether the researcher has done this or not, or whether the researcher collected additional data or not to substantiate what he has finally come up with. So is this the theoretical model that researcher claims to have developed? In reality, is there a theoretical model? Is the intent of this model to conceptualize a process, an action, an interaction there? So whether the grounded theory research report intends to explain the action, interaction, or a process. So if this is happening, then fine, the purpose is achieved. If this is not, then there is some problem. Then is there a central phenomenon or core category specified at the heart of the model? So if a grounded theory research report is there, so is there a central phenomenon put forth or a core category, which is the essence of this research methodology at the heart of the model? Then does this model emerge through phases of coding, or the researcher has jumped the gun? So this has to be, clearly, minutely observed, that, proper process of arriving at the abstraction or arriving at the theory is open coding to axial coding, and then axial coding to selective coding. Selective coding, as I said, is the last phase of theory generation. So whether this process has been followed or the researcher has jumped the gun. So these are the criteria. With the help of that, we can evaluate grounded theory research. Then comes ethical issues related to this. Ethical issues are, you have to understand this. You have to keep in mind, like all research endeavors, avoid any exploitation upon either research populations or organizational settings for private gains. Do not force any participant to take part in research. They should be willing. They should be proactive. You should not force them to take part in research. Even if you force them, even if you apply some external forces via media, you cannot get the real expression, real responses. Here you are not supposed to gain numbers, obtain numbers. You have to get the real picture of their emotions, real picture of how do they think, how do they interact with each other, how do they, what is the intention of any particular behavior or any particular societal processes. So for that, you should not force. Take individual difference in terms of gender, culture, and religion into account in their research. Be sensitive towards that. Reduce the use of research techniques which might adversely affect the participants. For instance, if you're going to observe their classes or observe their particular teaching learning methods, so your own research techniques should not hamper the actual processes going on. Be conscious to the ongoing organizational activities or ongoing societal activities and to report. Do not cause any disturbance in that. Then report the research findings to the relevant research populations, organizations, and others in clear and suitable language. If you're a researcher and you should have participation, must be voluntary. As I said, voluntary is the must, and then you must inform what you have derived as meaning out of the process. Then researchers should gain informed consent. Expressed that they wanted to work on suicide survivals. Very complicated, very vulnerable. So you must keep all these things in mind, how to proceed further. Do not disturb their mindset. Do not create any problem in their life. Because ultimately, your purpose is not just a selfish purpose. Your purpose is very, very noble, very wide in terms of meaning making. And this is going to be, if you are doing any research, this is going to be in the benefit of your community. Community means educational community for society at large. So be very sensitive towards all these issues. I guess much of the things have been talked about. There are so many things, but I feel for that one single workshop would be fine. Here, I will just say that the process here is very important. Process is the only important thing in grounded theory research. And with the help of coding means leveling a phenomenon. Axial coding means connecting different levels for a common category. And then selective coding is the ultimate coding that will develop, that will help in generating theory. So that is the main purpose of this research, and that is the main process of research. So let me give you one example, that if your class, or if your students, or if your researchers express in words in a particular situation, when you are trying to understand what kind of learning they need, and somehow in their statements they have written something, and on the basis of their writing you have done an open coding, that wanting experiential learning, constantly learning, working in a good environment, pioneering social media, and easily adapting to change. These are the codes that you do based on their expressions. So these are wanting experiential learning, constantly learning, working in a good environment. These are the open codes that you have developed. If they say, we want to gain experience, we want to learn while experiencing something, not just by imposing concepts. If they are saying that, then you have denoted wanting experiential learning. This is the form of open coding. Constantly learning, working in a good environment. These are the labelings. These are the open coding. Then what you do as axial coding is, and bring out some common levels, like based on the three statements, that three different coding that I gave, you can write believing they are ready to learn, believing they are ready to participate in learning. Now, this becomes axial coding. Any other place, now another set of open coding is there, where if a student complains in their own specific sentence that teacher do not pay attention to their behavior, teacher do not give positive reinforcement to them, so then you can write as coding. But I'm not prescribing, because prescription is this research methodology is against to prescription. So you can write craving immediate feedback and being motivated by feeling appreciated. If somebody is feeling motivated by appreciation, you can write feeling motivated by appreciation. Another, you can write craving immediate feedback. So these are open coding. For that, axial coding is seeking external validation. So this is axial coding. Now, taking just two, I have many more, but taking these two. One you have done axial coding as believing they are ready to, participate in, they are ready to learn through experience based on the 3-4 different labelings. You have made axial coding. Another coding you have done, that one child has given that, oh, I'm not being recognized for my responses in class. Another child says, oh, I feel very motivated. Both of them. Or maybe similarly, even the first one says, oh, I feel bad when I do not get positive response. Or when teacher gave me positive response, when teacher say good, then I feel very motivated. So these two come under the same category, where you can do axial coding as seeking external validation. Now you have two, believing that they are ready to learn. Another axial coding is seeking external validation. Based on these two, you can have the selective coding, wanting to make a difference. Wanting to make a difference means finally you have arrived at a conclusion that all the children in the classroom want to make a difference. They have different experiences, they have different perceptions, but initially out of the interactions with them, you wrote sentences, then you gave labeling, then you did open coding, and out of the commonalities in open coding, you did axial coding, reducing the number of levels, and finally on the basis of axial codings, you finally came up with the idea of wanting to make a difference. Means the children of that particular class want to make a difference. And how will that be possible? If the positive reinforcement is given, if their work is recognized, so they are ready to make a difference. This is the contextualized theory that emerges out of your research. Very simple it looks, but very complicated this is, because there is a great risk of the real situation getting deformed if, as a researcher, you are not perceiving, you are not comprehending, or you are not conceptualizing it properly. So you have to be meticulous, you have to be very, very process oriented and very precise in coding, very precise in understanding the concepts, and very precise in making sense, and finally validating exactly the way I have just described. So this is all about grounded theory research. I think I have taken sufficient time.
Yes, sir.
And
shall we start, sir, with the question answer session?
Yes.
Okay, yes, sir. So there are a couple of questions, sir. The first question, Dr. Prerna. She's asking, in the present era, is there any relevance of grounded theory, as generalization is not possible? And a similar question is asked by Ms. Swati. Can we generalize the conclusions of grounded theory?
We should not believe in generalization, because this theory stemmed out of this perception that generalization is not necessary. In our family, we have 5 members, all are not behaving the same manner. Then why to generalize? There are certain commonalities, and those commonalities should be, see, reality is not of only one kind. Based on this premise only, qualitative approach research emerged. So in the present of the first question, I'm addressing that present scenario. In fact, this is a belief that present scenario needs much of these research methodologies.
Fine,
And no
sir.
generalization is needed. No generalization is needed.
Thank you, sir. The second question asked by Mr. Vijay Shri Jaiswal. He is asking, if subject is not allowing to record the voice, then in grounded theory, what the researcher will do?
Very true. Very important. Very important. Yeah, there are situations when they are very apprehensive of what they have said getting misused. So this is very important. Of course, if they are not allowing you, you don't record. Don't deceive them. Only thing is that you have to rely on your memory. Grounded theory comes again with the help with its methodology that says that you analyze your data immediately. So every day you interact with them, go and write, and then you analyze. Maybe you can face some problem, but rest assured, not all will be denying, or not all will be refusing your proposal of getting their interview or event recorded. Sometimes, I mean,
Fine,
it's up
sir.
to you to, yeah.
Yeah. Sir, the next question, Mr. Narendra Sethi. How does coding of qualitative data work in picking words by using grounded theory?
Yeah, I have just explained this just in the last of my lecture. I have just explained coding doesn't mean giving numerals. Coding can be done by words, and I have just explained that if students are saying something like even in the somewhere in the middle of my lecture, I explained that if you're asking some 5-10 children of a class that where are you going? You don't attend your class this time. So they say, sir, right, I have stomach upset or I have headache. So they are saying something. You are labeling unwillingness to attend class. So this is the coding. Maybe they can have genuine reason, but not all 10 or 15 children can have at the same time stomach upset, or all 10-15 children can have headache. So you
right,
can just see the pattern. You can try to understand the pattern of behavior and then bring out the theme. And then you do labeling. So labeling is very tricky, very different, and very complicated. But you have to become very conscious to do that. And without numericals, you can do labeling. This is what is the essence of qualitative research.
Right. So the next question asked by Dr. Nyaneshwar Bhamre, how grounded theory is different from ethnographic research? There is a similar question asked by Neha Dev and Shasti Agarwal. How can we differentiate between ethnography and grounded theory? How is it different from action research?
Action research, the difference between action research and grounded theory can be understood easily. Fine. Action research is one thing that, yeah, you are taking localized problem, you are taking contextualized problem, then you have, certain objective empirical observations to do that. But you do not go into depth of the perceptions or go into depth of the actual meaning making. In grounded theory, you do all these things. You make sense while in deep contact with the persons. Now coming to ethnography, ethnography is a process where you try to understand their cultural setting, you try to understand the social phenomena, you do study of a society or a culture or a community. For that, you have participant observations. For that, you have interview and other things. Here too, you find participant observations, and these things are there. But grounded theory doesn't claim to develop a theory which could be universal in nature. Grounded theory doesn't claim to give solution to all the problems. Grounded theory, and moreover, the basic difference between ethnography and grounded theory is that ethnography starts with certain theoretical framework. It has certain theoretical framework in mind when it starts. And then it tries to juxtapose its findings to see whether these findings of ethnographic result is in tune with the theoretical framework that we started with. Like if I did ethnography, I had the social constructivist perspective of learning in mind. I had symbolic interactionism in mind. And then I developed a theoretical framework. This happens in this situation, this happens. Then I went into field to do ethnography. Then I saw, I observed, I came up with the result. And then I matched the result with the conceptual framework that, okay, whether this conforms to the social constructivist perspective of learning or not. So this is ethnography. We have theoretical framework in the beginning. Grounded theory research doesn't have any theoretical framework in the beginning. Rather, and the purpose of grounded theory research is not to test any theory, rather to generate theory, rather to generate a contextualized theory. This is the basic difference.
Fine. So the next question is asked by Ms. Anita Vaidyanathan. How do we take into consideration the review of related literature while doing grounded theory research?
Well, to me, review of related literature, purpose of doing review of related literature here is not like what we do in other research studies. Because here in grounded theory research, we do not have any predetermined theme or predetermined, framework in mind. Because the purpose of review of literature is that we do review and then we find a gap, we try to problematize, and then we go with that to address the research question. Here in grounded theory, review of related literature can help only to understand how grounded theory research is done, or some nitty-gritty, how coding is done, how making meaning is carried out, how sense making is done. So these reviews of related literature can help you understanding the research methodology, understanding the research problem with actual situations where these research have been conducted. But here you are going to do study on a phenomena which is emergent in nature. As I said, one of the specific characteristics, emergent in nature, which is not predetermined. So review of related literature has a very limited role in that, though it is important for any research, but with a limited scope.
Fine, sir. So there is one interesting question asked by Ms. Jyotsna Sodhi. Is it possible that we start with a descriptive research, but eventually find out, and then we have enough data to come up with a theory, and then we switch to grounded theory?
No, I mean, see, descriptive research is what we call qualitative research. We tend to describe any phenomena. And, grounded theory research has no preset framework. There are certain elements that we have studied here that you have to do coding. There are open coding, axial coding, then you have selective coding. And while going through this process, finally at the stage of selective coding, you generate a theory. So this is what happens. So descriptive research means you started with something. But when you started with descriptive research, if you did not have any theoretical framework, then it's fine, then it could be. But I believe generally what happens if you are doing any research properly, then you start with certain theoretical framework in mind. Whereas grounded theory doesn't plead of any theoretical framework. So this is what is there.
So let's take the last question asked by Rakesh, Mr. Rakesh. Is there any software to analyze the data collected for grounded theory? A similar question asked by Ms. Ruqayya Rizvi. Which softwares are used for analyzing data in grounded theory research?
I have just said that. There are many software available. You can just do Google searching. I should not endorse any company. I should not endorse any software. There are many. But because I personally feel even without software, grounded theory data can be analyzed. But if you want to do that, because I personally feel there are, in qualitative research, your data volume is enough, much more. So you need to segregate certain things, you need to categorize, and you need to fix up categories. So that is there. But at the same time, if you wish to take help of software, that is fine. But the first and foremost thing is that my personal perception is, since all these research methodologies relate to a certain research paradigm where human sentiments, human comprehension, human intelligibility, human emotions are more important than any machine related outputs. So avoid as much as you can, but for those certain things, categorizing, classifying, interrelating, if you wish, you can use softwares, and good softwares are available there. Very good softwares are available.
Sir, let's take the final question, sir, by Miss Varsha Nath Sevate. She is asking, is there any book on coding and categorization of qualitative data?
Yes, book is there. I think I may not recall the name, but book is there. You can just search Google typing. I mean, there is one from University of Carolina, North Carolina, Charlotte, and then there are from this grounded theory school of thought. You can find that. And moreover, in general, Creswell's research methodology book or any other research methodology book, these things are there. But particularly, even for that, a handbook is there for coding available there.
Fine, sir. Now we are coming to the end of the session, sir. But it's my formal duty to propose the formal vote of thanks. Dr. Thakur kept the participants engaged during his presentation. I take this privilege and it's my honor to propose the formal vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. Gopal Krishna Thakur, for his comprehensive overview of grounded theory designs. Dr. Thakur kept the participants viewing live streaming on YouTube BTTC official channel active by his lucid delivery and effective PowerPoint presentation. Dr. Thakur clarified in a simple way about grounded theory designs. He emphasized grounded theory is a form of qualitative research which attempts to generate theory by making sense of the phenomena under study by means of collecting data, analyzing it, and deriving meaning out of the data. Sir further explained the concept of grounded theory, the genesis, philosophical underpinnings of grounded theory, and basic tenets of grounded theory. He highlighted the key characteristics of grounded theory research design, such as process approach, categories, coding, constant comparative analysis, negative case analysis, theoretical sensitivity, theoretical sampling, theoretical situations, memo writing, theory generation. Sir also focused on different types of grounded theory designs like the emerging design, the systematic design, and the constructivist approach design. Sir also touched upon when should the grounded theory be used, method, data analysis in grounded theory, general steps in theory design research. Finally, sir concluded with the evaluation of ground research theory and ethical issues. Dr. Gopal Krishna Thakur clarified the queries of participants with ease and patience. His session received a lot of positive comments by the participants on the YouTube platform. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.